that what I'll do is, since you'll be here, this will be something to pass around when I ask you to, and that is the advisory for black energy. Yeah, no, we've got a small enough group that we can pass it around, okay? And then, because if I'm going to be up there during it, then these are just the little workshop books when I ask you to. Just around the table. That's it. And these will be for references. If anybody wants to read them. And you can also, when I ask you to, just, well, what I might do is show it on the camera and then I'll give it to you. How about that? Hide my inhaler. Alright. Cool. Mark. Or anything. I don't even know what time it is. Oh, this will be nice. A nice size for the tabletop. Cool. Sure. One of those. Put the, yeah. There we go. They're a little hard to see. It's the one on where Alexander's written. It's just a bit, yeah. My attempt to reuse labels that were incompatible with my printer instead of just throwing them out. Yeah, he got one.
I've already been tagged and bagged and no one
There we go. Good, because I've got horrible handwriting. I tried to write his name, and that was my attempt at the word Alexander. This is why I'm in computers. I can't write anymore. I can try with the, I got, perfect. There we go. Okay. What? Alexander? No. And a bit, because the backbone of ICS is also IT. So it's just a very different concept when you're looking at the risk. With IT, the biggest concern is confidentiality. And do you think it's important for things to be confidential when you're turning the tap on for your water? I mean, their focus is to get your water there, not confidentiality, so it flips everything. And that's the difference. And it's can sometimes be very difficult to change your perspective suddenly from how you've been taught risk, and then you have to flip it upside down with control systems. But our world is now controlled by them. Your railroad systems, traffic light systems, satellite communications, elevators and building control systems, All manufacturing uses it, all of it. So nuclear power plants, electric power plants, transmission, water systems and water utilities. I mean, it's used pipelines.
I'm not completely sure, but I think in Bulgaria we're a bit safe just because we don't have most systems in the point.
I'm going to show you a little example in the beginning part, which will be streamed, which I pulled out some examples in Bulgaria.
Oh, okay. One
Yes.
plant is enough.
So I'll show you. Yes. I hope you don't mind me pulling up Bulgaria, because usually I'll use a different country wherever I'm traveling to, but I figured to introduce the topic, and it would probably be a small group, is to show map outlines of some of the vulnerable systems in Bulgaria that I found. Okay. All right. Oh, okay. All right, so it's already streaming, set up everything?
As far as I'm concerned, yes, but I'll check the link as well just in case. But I think it's already working.
Okay. Oh, I should stand a little back.
It's easier to go and ask them.
Oh, volume. No, the screen's on the other side.
Streaming is working.
Streaming is working. All right.
Yes, yet another guest will come later. He's a bit hungry right now.
All right.
Is there anything on the left? It's okay. Well, I mean, we're fine.
Okay.
Whatever you say.
Okay. And I'll get started. Well, good afternoon, everybody. On a wonderful Saturday that's sunny and gorgeous outside, and a working day, unfortunately. So what we're going to be talking about today is the risks with IT and ICS security, a little bit combined, some of the real-world challenges that we're seeing, and taking a look at the current issue with control networks, exposure to the internet, some case studies, including a case study involving the world's first known cyber attack that has been used to kill people. And then we'll also management life cycle, just a very brief overview. So to start, well, here's a mouse. There we go. So this is just what we're going to be going over. The people who wrote this particular workshop was a joint effort. Paul Spencer, who is a .NET developer, he's here and knows way too much about macros. He never wanted to know them. Tim Harwood, who comes from BP, who owns HT&C, which is a consulting and training company, but he came from BP as the security lead capability, and he has over 35 years of experience in both IT and ICS control systems and networks. And then myself, currently I'm a security researcher and a lecturer around the world. I also advise for the UK government for water utility issues, oil and gas, and the nuclear industry for cyber risk and assessments. And I just came from Saudi Aramco overseas, leading their network operations, security operations, and joint intelligence teams after we recovered from the Shamoon attack. So just a disclaimer, what we're saying is our own work or our own opinion. Too long, didn't read. We're not using information that is any of our clients' information or something that isn't publicly available, so please don't sue us. Now, some of the things that we want to familiarize folks with, this includes not only IT, but ICS security. It's something that comes from the States, and it's called the Traffic Light Protocol. And you'll see these on advisories when you look at certain types of vulnerability notices that national level certs will put out, like the Bulgarian cert, for example. And they'll typically use A red, which means it's a closed discussion. You usually need a secure portal to see this information, or a closed-off meeting where they'll be discussing some very private matters. If it's amber or orange, it's usually relevant with your peers. For example, there is something called the Malware Information Sharing Platform, which you can get off of GitHub, which a lot of national level certs use. And they put in the newest and greatest malware hashes that they find in their networks to compare it. And that's the same thing as amber or orange. And you can actually download or fork off of that GitHub. Green, you can talk to people within your own organization. And outside of your organization, if it's relevant. And white, it's already up on the internet. So what I just wanted to do was just around here, a brief introduction. We've got some names, but just your name and basically what your awareness is involving IT and ICS systems. Paul?
I'm aware because I'm married to you and I deal with that every day. But I work in the oil industry, but nowhere near ICS. All development stuff.
Okay.
And as a developer, obviously I ignore security completely.
Exactly, exactly.
So I'm Vladimir. I work in web development, WordPress mostly. So I got nothing to do with ICS. Doing some web security, but nothing further than that.
Excellent.
I am Benedict. I'm just like him, but I'm just starting with the web development.
Excellent.
I have interest in security, but just from curiosity, I'm reading some articles, and I also don't know anything about industrial control.
Well, great news. A lot of industrial control systems nowadays are sold with embedded web servers attached to them. Isn't that great? Yeah. But exactly, exactly.
Okay, so my name is Todor. I work as a system/network administrator, and I have cheated my employer that I know something about security of IT. I think security, but mostly as a type of prevention, not working directly with such type of devices. That's it. Mostly in IT security, nothing in ICS.
Excellent. And the great news is a ton of IT equipment is used in control networks and ICS security.
My name is Valery. I work as a system administrator in a private company in the nuclear. We had in the past some work with our nuclear power plant. Currently we have projects with the border police here in Bulgaria. And I thought that it will be interesting to me and it will be useful.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Last but not least.
I'm Alex. I'm as always Vladimir and Benedict working in the IT, but I have a financial background and for 4 years I was working in business processing outsource measures for making sure that no information is leaving the office, but of course quite a lot of those things left.
Like the joke, we look at the security very seriously because we don't know anyone to know what kind of things we are doing, what kind of shit is done.
I like that. I like that. That's excellent. So hopefully this is going to be a bit of an eye-opener and drive you towards my world a little bit more with control networks, because I find it very fun to move things with technology. And that's what control systems and control technology does. It moves the world. So the target audience we're looking at is all sorts of industrial systems, including nuclear, regular technologists, everyday people, policymakers, can't believe he's going to be president, and anyone concerned with keeping the lights on. Now, there's a difference between ICS and IT security. The book definition of what ICS is, you can think of it as an envelope. The people, the tools, the technology, anything that keeps the lights on. The process is included as an envelope. And that's basically what it is. So if you're involved anywhere in the nuclear industry, for example, as a now we like to confuse ourselves. This is a word map from ANISA. And you know how much acronyms are used in the IT world, right? They do the same thing in the ICS world. For example, an RTU can be a remote terminal unit. It can be a remote thermal unit. It can be a remote telemetry unit. All different usage, but they're basically the same type of things. The technology that moves the world in different types of formats. And they're used in just about every place that you could think of, especially with space technology and telecommunications. So why are we bothering? Oh, I see it doesn't come out very clear, but that's okay. One of the challenges is companies want to save money, so they do outsourcing, right? And hey, that's fantastic, but their aim and focus is going to be to their outsourcing company, not to your company. So when you outsource, their focus has changed, which means they might not report to you a danger or a bunch of firewall activity with attackers or worm knocking at your door because it's not included in the contract. That's typically what will happen with outsourcing. But outsourcing, again, makes businesses be very, very flexible. So it's one of those fine balancing acts. There's a lot of regulation that just changes constantly. Risk management, like testing, we had a conversation before the presentation about adequate testing for code and that type of thing, really isn't done that well. With control systems, they can be really, really old. And I mean really old. There are control systems in Western Europe that are running transport systems that are 45 years old. So what that means is you got a whole bunch of old legacy stuff, and if it's hit by an attack, it can't log because it can't actually log anything. So you can't see where the attacker got in. You certainly have a difficult time auditing it for risk purposes because it's so old, you can't really audit it. And if you try to test it, it's going to fall over, and where do you get a replacement part? So it's a really big challenge, and you certainly can't patch them. And if you try to patch control systems, many times, especially in the nuclear industry, you have to recertify an entire plant if you upgrade from, say, Service Pack 2 to Service Pack 3. And some countries, they make you do that. And that means you have to bring down your plant for a month. So it can be very challenging. That's one of the reasons why you hear all of these news articles about the dangers of control systems and these sensitive systems being connected to the internet. Another one is we now have our first known case from December 2014 of cyber being used as a weapon to kill people in Germany. And I'll go into detail about that because it was a big game changer. No one had ever seen anything like that. Another one is we've a rise in nation-state activity, espionage, and also hacktivism. If you look on the Wikipedia article about cyber warfare, they state there's 172 recognized countries, and 147 countries have publicly stated that basically everywhere are getting these capabilities for offensive security. Viruses and malware, they've risen in sophistication. Back in the day when I was much younger, a bit of malware might be a marching band across your screen, or playing some music, or even patching your system. That doesn't happen anymore. It's mainly for monetary gain, basically. Most of them are quite large. And it's this type of unit that you would control, you would program, and then the outputs would be output to something that would actually move, like a conveyor belt or a rail system or something like that. And you can directly program on it with USB, mini USB. You can go ahead and control it. That model can actually control a small building. It's got 6 digital outputs and 6 digital inputs. So that's pretty cool. IT is definitely the backbone of a control network because things have to communicate to each other. There are many times remote sites, especially in the water industry. You'll have a water pump pumping fresh water out of a reservoir far away because they're very, very noisy, but somehow they have to communicate to that remote site. So obviously they use IT technology to do so. Now that means that you can introduce IT vulnerabilities into a control network, trying to keep the control network communications up if it's not properly patched or maintained in that control network. I like to call it IT creep. When the IT equipment starts creeping in, starts going into the control network, and then many times it's completely forgotten about, and it isn't maintained properly. So you end up putting IT in, thinking it might even solve a problem or make things better, and it introduces a new security hole. Now for the risks, when we're dealing with IT, most people are concerned with confidentiality, then integrity, then availability. Because in IT, we've got built-in error correction in many of our protocols to help with availability. For example, with the TCP/IP stack, it's got error correction. Now when we're talking about SCADA usages and connecting things, things are very, very different. We actually flip it around because we're concerned with the safe and reliable operation of a plant, not confidentiality, right? And that's what the big concern. Now the risks that we're looking at, IT versus ICS, IT doesn't kill people. At least we don't know yet. Maybe the Ashley Madison, when it came out, a bunch of people were having an affair, some people killed themselves, but when we've seen cases where technology has killed people, it's control stuff. Robotics, there's been a death already. There's been another stabbing, and then with insulin pump and medical technology that has killed people, that's actually considered control systems, because anything that moves in technology is considered an ICS system. And when we're looking at the risks, if you lose data, it sucks. If you lose a life, that sucks even more, because data is one thing. A human life is, unfortunately, until we get human cloning down, irreplaceable. An IT network is built for very high throughput. There are control networks that are operating with 900 baud modems still, believe it or not. I don't know if the hackerspace even has any of those old modems, but they actually still use them in many control systems. And they're low throughput, so they don't have a lot of error correction, and you can't flood them or do much with them or add any additional noise. You can actually DOS a control network. So you have to be very careful. I'm going to show you a video, if I can get my mouse over here. Nope. There it is. That's just not broadcasting. There was my mouse.
Technology, Internet Engineering. Today we'll be seeing a video that's part of a series of videos that shows how cyber attacks can occur against industrial process systems.
Can you hear that?
The intent of these videos is to educate process engineers, systems managers, and administrative personnel on how important it is to protect the process control systems, SCADA systems, and industrial environments from outside attacks. You're looking at the Internet Engineering Lab at British Columbia Institute of Technology, one of North America's top cybersecurity test facilities for industrial security. In it, you'll find industrial load generators, protocol analyzers, routers big and small, and a lot of industrial process SCADA equipment and DCS and PLC equipment. It allows us to emulate very realistic attacks that might occur against industrial systems, such as denial of service attacks, virus propagation, or just plain hacking. It is the basis for a lot of the demo you're going to see today. The video you're about to see is called the Modbus attack video, and it shows how an attacker with no knowledge of PLCs or SCADA systems or DCS or any other industrial systems could launch a devastating attack against an unprotected PLC. Please understand that this information is extremely sensitive and could be dangerous in the wrong hands. Be discerning when sharing this information with others.
Good news is the entire series on YouTube.
Here's the equipment we'll be using for today's demo. It's a very simple demo, simply a laptop, this will be the hacker's laptop, and a PLC running a program that has a light bulb on. Nothing fancier than that, but then this isn't a complex demo. The laptop is going to get into the network through some sort of back door. Now, it could be right through, or maybe a trusted third party, but in this case, through a wireless connection, and perhaps our hacker is sitting in the parking lot, now scanning inside a process control network. And that's exactly what the hacker would do to start with. He would scan to see what is contained inside the network he just broke into. The first thing we need is a scanner program. Most hackers would probably use a program called Nmap, but today I'm going to use a program called SuperScan because it runs on Windows and is clearer to see on video. Here's my SuperScan program. I'm going to start off by entering a range of numbers here that are IP addresses inside the network I want to scan, and then hitting the start button here. And you can see here the computer's being scanned by the program, and the program is attempting to discover what application is running on it. It's now completed, and we can now look by scrolling down. There are a number of programs available, a number of computers with a number of programs. Of interest are the ones with the little squares beside them. Number 225, 2, 2, 2, colon, no, 2, 2, colon, no, wonders. And what does he do next? Well, he has to find out about the Modbus protocol. On Google, we'd enter in some of those keywords like Modbus, TCP, port 502, and specification, and search for those. And right off the bat, what does he discover? The Open Modbus TCP specification. He can now go in and have a look at this and discover how the protocol works and how he might be able to attack it. Here he has the whole Open Modbus TCP specification in front of him, and he can scan down through it and quickly discover a series of function calls and commands that will allow him to do things like read and write to the PLC. Say, for example, that he finds here's the force multiple coils command with a complete layout of what a message should look like if you want to force coils in a PLC. At the bottom is an example on how to write 3 coils in a Monocom 984. Below that is the hex code you'd actually need to enter into a message you want to send to the PLC. You can take a sample of this particular command, copy it, and using a hex editor, for example, one here, he can build a file like this one based on what he just learned in the specification. In this case, we'll call this command relay off, and we'll also create a second one called relay on. The hacker would use netcat, which you can see here, along with the attack address of the device we want to attack, port 502, and the string in the file we just created a few minutes ago, relay off, to be able to control the light. He could also use the string relay on to be able to turn the light back on. Clearly, this doesn't take a lot of skill. This is a very, very basic attack that requires a very simple tool, netcat, and a basic lookup of the Modbus protocol. What can we learn from this demo? First, anytime an attacker can see a Modbus-based device on a network, he can control it. The protocol completely lacks any authorization or authentication and will accept any commands sent to the device without question. Second, you don't need to know anything about PLCs, or SCADA systems, or Modbus to be able to attack these devices. You can look up the information in minutes on the internet. Here at the BCIT Internet Engineering Lab, we welcome any comments, questions, or requests.
Now that video is a bit old school. There's a couple of things to note about it. Protocol specifications to connect to these devices. Now, he had an old school Wi-Fi card, and most likely nowadays you're not going to have somebody with a big old antenna or a repurposed Pringles can as an antenna in a parking lot, just scanning away. Typically, it's now going to be over the internet or via a third-party connection. And also, I think you've noticed that there's a lot of IT equipment that they use with that, with routers, with switches that you saw on the rack equipment, which is very similar to a big IT network. So they share a lot of commonalities. Now I'm going to show you a bit of an updated one. There we go. It went on my other screen because it wants to go on my other screen. I'm just going to fix this and duplicate, and hopefully that'll fix this problem. So this is a search engine called Shodan. How many of you have heard of Shodan? A few. So basically, Shodan is what Google kind of used to be if you could do a lot of Google dorking and things like that without getting kicked off of Google, which can be painful by what they could find on the internet, especially control systems. Now with Shodan, it doesn't cost any money to use it. However, to get real results, you do need to pay. It costs maybe about $50 US a year to get all the results that you would probably want. And in this case, they introduce it like this. It's a search engine for webcams. That's why I have my webcam always covered. Refrigerators, yes, smart appliances. They can act against you. Websites, power plants, the Internet of Things. So basically anything that could connect to the Internet. And Shodan allows you to find it. Now you don't need to know the technical information of how to connect to a webcam, for example. They've got web searches and that type of stuff. And if you don't know about ICS, it happens to be in the spotlight right now. And they describe where some of these things are used and what common terms are. One of my favorites is the automated license plate reader because they're rarely locked down. So I get a ton of very interesting information at secure facilities because they put the information directly on the internet. And these are different types of protocols that are used in industrial control systems. Now I'm going to use an example for a Siemens system. Siemens Systems S7 was the one that was attacked in Stuxnet. And in this case, I found a PLC in the country of Poland directly connected to the internet very easily. I only had to use port 102 to actually just press a button. It already fills in the port and then stipulate the country. And then we can see it's running a lot of very interesting other things, such as FTP, OpenSSH. It banner grabs, and it will show you the exact versions of it, which, of course, you can use to find a vulnerability. It will also map the information for you so you can do physical reconnaissance and case the joint, so to speak, and look if there's a smoking door that's left propped open sometimes and things of that nature. So taking a look at banner grabbing all the things that are running on this particular PLC, this is an automation control system for the Ministry of Culture in Poland that runs their systems there in that building. They definitely have Siemens systems. It says it right there. They also have a hardware problem. It's running Modbus, which means it requires no authentication, and it will take any command from any device anywhere in the world. It also has a database connected to it that you can exploit, which is kind of a juicy level to exploit for an exploit. Basically works like an earthquake magnitude. Anything 8.0 to 10 is actually quite dangerous. Many times there's a Windows-based GUI tool to do it. So you can be basically a script kiddie. Now, I found the exact version that they're running, which is a Step 7 300. The 300, yes, it's been for 4 years. And there are a lot of these types of databases where you can find this information. Now in the background, I did a little bit of research and found that the S7 200 series, 300, and 1200 series share common libraries, which means if I can find an exploit that's usable and the other hardware, I could probably use it against theirs to test it out and try. And luckily, the internet shows us that there's 10.0s for and that is it. So nowadays, you don't need anything really but Google and the internet. And you can be a rather high-skilled hacker getting into a control network. That's basically what it boils down to nowadays. Now, type of attack vector. Lockheed Martin is a defense contractor and builds a lot of defense hardware. And they were building and still are building this really, really expensive aircraft called an F-35. And while they were developing it, they found that they were compromised. The reason The way that they found out they were compromised was because they were shown pictures of a Chinese military parade which showed the J-31, which was the Chinese version of the F-35A, which means the Chinese had actually gotten in to the research and development systems and had redeveloped the F-35A into the J-31. And the great thing about the J-31 is it actually flies. And the F-35 right now has buffer overflow problems in the flight computer. And I'm not joking.
But cost $2 billion.
Yeah, you know? Yeah, exactly. So they tried to learn from their mistake. And they were actually compromised not directly, but through their security vendor, RSA. That's what they use for dual factor authentication for the research and development. RSA was compromised, and they were able to get in via RSA, their security partner. So they say, okay, how can we do something about this to avoid it happening again? And they broke up how attacks are done. It usually starts with reconnaissance, because you need to get to know a little bit about your target, right? Especially like, I'm sure you've seen mob movies where they're casing a bank joint and seeing the employee movements and how people move around inside an organization many times. The permissions that they had from their old role, they have in their new role too, because it's easier for an administrator to copy and paste instead of really looking at the permissions very closely. And for technology, what these two things basically say with technology is, 2012, Verizon found that there are 5 pieces of software that should be kept updated, and you can mitigate or minimize the risk of compromise by 97%. And that's Windows operating system patching and updating, Office patching, updating, Adobe Acrobat Reader, Java, and Flash. And those 5 things, you can minimize it. The Danish CERT that same year said 99% of things could be minimized if you updated those 5 pieces of software. Now, in 2015, Verizon released another report which said the most popular exploits used for vulnerabilities, they weren't brand new, they weren't zero-day, they weren't something fancy schmancy you hear about on the news. They were old school ones from 2010 and 2011, right? So they keep getting regurgitated, and people just aren't patching. And it's a shame because the Verizon one actually deals solely with IT networks, not with control networks. So the problem in IT networks is also, well, problematic. We also have a problem with things like passwords. How many of us like passwords? Yeah, passwords. So when you're working around, you end up having to remember 50 different passwords, or you have to share passwords in a shop or something like that.
Only one strong password for your key pass manager.
Yeah, now that's the good way to go, but most people unfortunately don't know about that, so they end up recycling passwords over and over again, which means if you get one password, you can use it for their Yahoo mail, you can use it for their work email, you can use it for their banking, whatever, which is great. There's a technique that can make it a bit easier. This is actually up on Wikipedia, and it's one of my favorite cartoons from this group, and it basically explains how making complicated passwords can be hard for you to remember and easy for a computer to break in some cases. But if you make it using 4 random common words, in this case don't use correct horse battery staple, by the way. And then mathematically, it's much more difficult for you to actually break it with a computer, but it's usually easy for you to remember. And you can actually see this. And this is a really good example of how you can make passwords stronger. Or in your example, having a very strong key pass and then having that locked down. So KeyPass, for example, it's a free tool, and it will encrypt your stuff to AES 256. And you can also change around the algorithms a bit and add Whirlpool or Blowfish or something like that for a little bit of extra spin. So it's quite handy. For the attack surface with the people, now it costs money to educate people and tell people, hey, you know, if you see something, say something, basically. But it can be quite necessary to do that when you're dealing with a bit more sensitive systems, or if you're a vendor dealing with sensitive systems, or a contractor, or a freelancer, or whatever. Actually, that one we'll take out. Now, this is typically what a control system will look like with an enterprise system. And this is actually the control part, all the way down here. Usually you've got your corporate IT up here, it's connected to the internet, whatever. And then they'll have a DMZ right here, which is a shared zone between the control network and the IT network. That way somebody up here shouldn't directly be able to touch anything down here and break something, basically. Now what happens many times is firewalls are typically misconfigured. That's a big one. I find that almost at every single site that I visit. They'll have firewalls that have been plugged in and been used for a couple of years. It ends up their firewall rule set's about 2,000. And in between, somewhere logic is going to get screwed up with firewall rule logic, and there's a big open hole. And that's really, really common. You don't really want office malware down in a control network, because that could be bad. You have insecure code, but that can happen just about anywhere. Remote connections, this is a very common thing. In control systems, many of the vendors use things like VNC or other types of remote tools which have little to no security. And they're directly getting in from the outside into there. And that's really, really common. You also have other dangers where you think you have things connected and disconnected, but somebody's plugged something else in. And that happens a lot. When people plug their phones in directly to like either an office computer or an engineering computer, you introduce, well, a big hole. Yeah. Yeah, well, yes. Because you're basically connecting it now to the internet. You've now made it the Internet of Things at that point. And this happens a lot. The insecure USB, you would not believe how many people still will pick up a USB and just plug it into their systems. It amazes me. And then another one is setting up rogue wireless devices to interfere with the legitimate access points, because there are vulnerabilities in Wi-Fi connections. You may notice on your Android phones, your iPhone, Windows-based phones, Windows-based systems, if you've already connected to the NIT Labs Wi-Fi at one point in time, and then you travel to someplace else and they have an access point called the same exact thing, your computer or phone by default will automatically try to connect to that network. So you can actually spoof the access points and then screw with a control network or an enterprise network or just anyone's internet browsing fun time, basically. So there's a lot of problems, but there are ways to fix it. You also have to be aware of things such as this. Unfortunately, I left it with my passport. Usually carry it, but this is an example of a keylogger. And let me pull out. I've got many, many other keyloggers right there. So these are sold out in the open. They're used for a variety of reasons. Let's say you have a teenager you want to keep a handle on and surveil them. Maybe you don't trust your partner. Maybe you want to use it for employee monitoring. So they're allowed to sell these out in the open. And they come in many different formats. Everything from USB, video, PS2. And this is one that is used a lot in control networks. And what will happen is when a vendor or technician leaves, they'll leave behind this, and it's in between the connection because control systems still use serial connections. And this can transmit over Wi-Fi. They also have GSM SIM ones. They'll transmit, let's say, all the usernames and passwords and stuff. And it's not a very good thing. And they even have ones where if you've got a bigger keyboard, you can actually embed a module inside the keyboard. So they're sold rather openly. Another thing is when folks talk about, oh, security and how much money are we going to spend on this, or, oh, maybe we shouldn't connect this if everything isn't absolutely perfect. There is no way that you're going to ever have perfect security. Life is not risk-free. If it was, it would be really, really boring to be honest with you. But you can only do what you can do and try to minimize things. Nothing's perfect. Now, when we start to talk about what the security risk is, it's not a perfect mathematical equation, but you're combining things of, is there a threat out there? Is there a vulnerability? Can somebody exploit it? Are you really attractive, especially if you make money? And what the consequences could be of that. So some of the threats can include attackers. Internal, external, doesn't matter. I'll say a naughty hacker, not a hacker like me, or someone like that. Human error, things happen, and many of these things can happen. But the main thing is, who's interested in harming many of these systems? And what it boils down to is normally money, which is a big one. Organized criminal gangs, hey, it's a business. They sell malware packages. You can get packages where, hey, I want to buy this particular type of malware, but I'm not sure how to set it up. So I'm willing to pay extra for 4 hours of over-the-phone customer support to help me set up my malware package. And the support comes in 16 different languages currently for one of the ones that I deal with. A naughty hacker could be anything, or a nice hacker could be curiosity. I mean, if you're on the internet and something takes a command and you don't know what it is, you turn off the lights just out of curiosity because it requires no authentication. What do? Insiders, anything. But these are typically the major threats against any sort of enterprise, an organization, you, me, everyone else. Ransomware is a big one with, or a big money maker with organized crime right now, which is a good example. And I meant to take this out. When we talk about malicious codes, there are different types of malicious code. Virus is something that requires some sort of human interaction. A worm won't require interaction. It can go by itself. And then a Trojan is something that pretends to be legitimate, and it's naughty on the back end. Back in the days, almost all the time these things used to be included in the key cracker software when you would try to get key. Not that I ever did that, but other people who used to get keys from software, they were included in key cracker software. Now when we look at some recent examples of malware, does anybody know what this is? International Space, yeah, ISS. So what happened was a few years ago, an unnamed astronaut had a USB thumb drive because I think the person wanted to bring up their music collection, and it wasn't scanned, and they plugged it directly in, and it affected the water recycling on ISS, and they had to do physical workarounds until it was fixed. So we brought our problems into space. How many of you are familiar with Stuxnet? Stuxnet was a naughty, interesting one. What had happened was there was a piece of malware, and the goal was to get it into a nuclear enrichment facility in Iran. I won't go into details of what intelligence agency may have done it or whatever, but the goal was they knew that vendors and technicians plugged a USB into systems to update them, and they weren't scanned. So somehow they got it onto a USB drive that an engineer then plugged into the underground uranium enrichment facility. And it then infected it with something called Stuxnet. And what Stuxnet did was it would display false information on the engineer screen. Just like if you're looking at your screen, you think your computer's running fine, but in the background it actually isn't. And in the background, the malware was making the centrifuges spin outside their operating range at random periods, and it caused them to physically break. So they kept physically breaking their centrifuges while the malware was going around. So it was a big one because it was really targeted and only hit a Siemens S7 system with certain parameters, with that particular Windows XP Service Pack version and everything. So it was really targeted. Now, unfortunately, the malware got out on the internet and was reused. And it became a bit of a malware family. So Stuxnet got reused to Dooku, which is commonly used for espionage. Flame was made famous by a burning American flag, playing AC/DC music as it wiped your hard drives and systems in the background. It's lovely, isn't it? Right? Shamoon, I'll go into a bit more detail in a bit. That one hit Saudi Aramco and the country of Qatar. Havex, its primary focus initially was the pharmaceutical industry to steal pharmaceutical processing information and the research and development going on from there. And then it just broadened into Germany in 2014. And black energy is currently a huge threat, which I'll go into in detail. Have any of you seen any of these things?
Black energy wasn't it in Ukraine?
The Ukraine, yes. One of the countries. Yep. Have you folks ever seen any sort of dodgy cloned websites, semi or targeted phishing emails type of thing, or something? Like, yeah, it's more and more common, right? Almost everybody's seen these lovely pieces of malicious code. So, to discuss black energy. Black energy did not start out attacking ICS systems, hitting the Ukraine and places like that. It actually was started as a bit of a crimeware package where you could buy it and then you could DDoS and use it for DDoS attacks. And that's what it was first used for in 2007. The second version came out with encryption, which is great because that means they could hide their activity, rootkits, and it was used for bank fraud and also DDoS attacks. The first modern variant in 2014 was very interesting. It only affected the Ukraine and Poland at that time. And what it would do is the Windows operating system, the 64-bit version, it will implicitly trust a driver that is digitally signed. And what they would do is, if they couldn't break that, they would cause it to reboot, alter the boot record, and then alter it in a way that the signing was in test mode. So then they could override that setting if they couldn't get the driver certificate. They also came out with the light version that affected a bunch of BlackBerry devices, which was quite nice. And then they had a hybrid. Now, it came with a lot of features, it still does. So you can have Team Viewer, you can have remote desktop. You can have, it's called a parasitic infector. Screenshots, all of the network information, it can scan it for you and report everything. Keylogger, network scan, update malware for updated malware packages. And unfortunately, this didn't come through destroy system. Now, destroy system, it'll rewrite just about anything on your system it wants to. It'll do it randomly. And then it will hit all of your database files, Microsoft library files, PDFs, and system files. It'll fill it with random data. It'll delete itself. And then it'll start deleting sectors of the system drive and then rewriting things with random data so you can't restore your data. So it's kind of naughty if you're an attacker. And the great news is it's been expanded. There are outside organized criminal firms that build in multiple plugins to add functionality onto it. Yeah, exactly, right? Now, the current one made the news because in December, twice the Ukraine was affected with their power distribution. And it was a really, really naughty attack. I'll try not to go into politics and just say in December, some things happened. And in the Ukraine, they were affected 80,000 customers. What happened was customers tried to call to report that they had no electricity. The phone lines calling in were DOSed, so nobody could actually call. And then when they figured out that there was a problem, when they tried to do what's called the work ticketing system to send techs out to fix the problem, that system was also DOSed. In addition to that, the same time the Ukrainian rail system was actually, they tried to DOS it and stop it from moving, which was very interesting. Also, to hide itself, it liked to uninstall its current version every 39 days and then reinstall another version so that it made it more difficult. And the current version, it doesn't matter if it's an old Windows XP system, it can also affect the newest and greatest Windows systems. Now, I have a technical advisory, which is more on you guys' level that you can actually read about Black Energy, because they've got snort signatures, YAR rules, and things you can play around with to see and modify it and find these things if you can grab a sample, which is kind of cool. Now, the thing is, it's extended beyond the Ukraine. We now know that it's been used most likely in an Israeli attack in January, where the Israeli government said that they were subject to a massive cyber attack and they had disruption in their electricity, but they would not go further. And in South Korea, it has been used repeatedly over the past few months, also disrupting their railroad system and trying to stop it. As well as affecting all of their nuclear power plants and trying to use it to attack all of them in South Korea. And it makes you sad. And Paul, you wanted to do your example? This is actually this is an example screenshot from the Ukraine of what it originally looked like. And they would try to get users to enable the macro content, thereby allowing the macro to run with full permissions.
Okay. So, for the last 20 years or so, 15 years, let's call it. Oh, hello. For the last 15 years or so, no one has ever turned on their macro security after their systems administrators have told them not to turn it on.
No one's
Never happened. Well, actually, that's exactly how Black Energy, I believe, was first infected to the Ukrainian system, was through a payload that was delivered in a spear phishing email that had an Excel spreadsheet with a macro with a payload. So let's just see if we can look at what Excel is. Actually, I should tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm sitting here. I was a programmer in a language called PIC for 5 years. Great, fantastic. Moved to the Netherlands thinking, hey, I've been a programmer for 5 years. I should be time to make big money. Unfortunately, when I moved to the Netherlands, I found out that PIC in Dutch means penis. So I was a PIC expert, but I couldn't get the jobs that I had intended to. So I didn't like being unemployed, so I took a job, first job I could find, which was an administrative job, and realized within a few weeks that, hey, I could automate everything I have. I could automate everything I have in Visual Basic, and then for about 6 months, I had a very nice life insofar as I could do my entire week's work in half a day. Unfortunately, someone spotted that and made me do that Visual Basic for applications full time. 6 years of pain later, I decided to become a proper programmer again, but it does mean, unfortunately, I have too much Visual Basic for applications in my blood. So I'm just going to, I must warn you, actually it's been 10 years since I've programmed Visual Basic for applications professionally. This is more for fun. So let's, how does one open Excel?
You have to type it.
Yeah,
there you go.
Okay, so let's create a sheet with a macro. Let's create a new one. The problem with macros is they're so easy to make that everybody makes them. Why is this a problem? Well, this is a problem because I worked in the finance industry for a good part of my 20 years experience of programming. And yeah, everyone uses Excel in the finance industry. And anyone with any sort of brains realizes that they can automate some of their stuff. So let's grab something. I'm going to record a macro. Let's call it my bad macro. Do whatever I like. Stop recording. So now we can look at our macro. Our macro doesn't do very much. Just writes gobbledygook into a cell. But it can do a lot. It can do. It can write to your registry settings, so it can change what you have in your startups. It can run PowerShell scripts, shell script. It can deploy programs. So I'm going to use the example of, does anyone know the attack called Rocket Kitten? It was an attack on some German-speaking and Israeli military and academic sites, and it basically was using a lure that was an Excel sheet. Again, it was using spear phishing. It was targeting specific people with lures that were specifically for them. So the spreadsheet, when you opened it, the first page of the spreadsheet would have, say, pictures of people or that were in your industry, or it would say a list of, one of the simplest one was a list of holidays, and then this would come from your say someone in your HR department, and it would ask you to start a to enable the macros. So I've got a macro here, nothing very interesting in it. I am going to save this. Save it on my desktop. I'm going to save it, in this case it's one with macro enabled spreadsheet. Okay, so let's close this. Let's have a look at our desktop. Oh, where's my sheet?
Yeah,
I lost my sheet somewhere.
there, no,
Let's use
there it is, by CP9 Manager.
CP.
Second row, third down,
Second row,
third down.
third down here. Okay,
Where's
so,
the steering wheel?
so what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to, well, first things first is, since a while back, I think 2010 or maybe 2007, Excel sheets aren't Excel sheets. Excel sheets are zip files. So I'm going to open this zip file. Oh, you're using different to me. Let's see. I don't know if I can edit this from here. Can I edit files in here?
No, but you can, you'd probably be better off changing the file extension back and then doing a copy, and on that copied file, making that a zip.
Well, let's just have a look
You
at
can look.
this file here. Okay. In here I have an XML. Wrong one. Sorry, .props. An XML file called core XML. Here I will. I can't edit it
View
from here.
file?
Let's view file. Here you can see the name of the person who last modded it, was Shrubbery, and I created a Shrubbery. I could just change this to your name, and then the spoofed email comes from your name. They open it, they see it's created by you, it's modified by you, it's from your name, and then within my VB file, which is stored here in this bin file here, I can point to another item that I can store in this zip, which can have my payload. So for example, in the Rocket Kitten attack, it used a wrapper around a well-known and white hat tool that's used for penetration testing, and install that on your system. And if you receive an Excel sheet and you choose enable macros, it's easy to say you're an idiot, but it's easier to say that the entire financial industry rests on people who have created Excel sheets with macros, and if you receive someone a macro-enabled spreadsheet from a colleague of yours, then at least in the financial industry, you're going to press enable macros. So anyway, that was from me. I will hand back to Christina.
Can I mention something? Because in this outsourcing company, at some point I saw with no other job to do, I started doing macroses, and it was really something that I found that it's really, let's say, hackable. Because we have our holidays delivered by macroses, and I have access to the server, so I can easily change this and do quite a lot of bad stuff. And the thing that I found later is that you really can start another program with a macro and tell the other program what to do. So I can easily, let's say, in our IT world, we have FileZilla, which is FTP client, and usually people are storing their FTP data there. So data like username and password and everything else. So with a simple macro, I could open the file, the FileZilla, and say export to that data, and then pick the file and send it by mail. So it's really a nasty tool if you know how to use it.
It allows you to access to almost everything.
Yeah.
You can fire shell commands that will open your command in administrator role and hide it. So that's nasty. I know with the RocketCom the Rocket Kitty or Rocket Kitten.
Rocket Kitten.
Rocket Kitten. It used one of the things it did is it just looked at your Firefox databases and pulled them off because that's got your passwords.
Yeah, don't ever store your passwords in your internet browser.
And then it sent them back, and yeah, you from within VBA, it's so powerful, and it's so easy to block, and it's so easy to unblock.
Yeah, and as you said, it's really hard for the financial world not to use it.
Yes, because it's ingrained everywhere.
Yeah.
How much harm can you get in the Linux environment with enabling the macros in OpenOffice? Or you haven't checked?
I have never
I've
used
never
that.
checked actually.
Okay.
But
That's
it
how
is
it
very
is. We
interesting.
can play some macros there, but
Yeah.
at the
Yeah,
same
but
time you don't have the same registry and stuff. So maybe it's
They use another language. It's not the Visual Basic for application. It's even I think JavaScript you can use for macros, and it depends on what rights does the JavaScript has. A bit more complicated.
But as you mentioned about FileZilla, the tool, it doesn't encrypt the passwords, and you just get the host, the username, the password, everything in a single file.
Yeah.
Plain XML.
Great. So somebody's recycling the passwords. Woohoo! Yeah, right? Fantastic. So on the next one, going into detail from the Saudi Aramco attack. How many heard of the Saudi Aramco attack? 1, 2, well, only because you're married to me. Basically, to give you an idea, because I'll move forward, Saudi Aramco is the most valuable company in the world by far. You might hear on news stories saying that Google Alphabet's worth $1 trillion, or Apple's worth $1 trillion, or something else worth $1 trillion. Saudi Aramco is estimated to be worth over $10 trillion US. They are the world's largest provider of oil and oil materials. They have the world's largest reserves. The second or third largest reserves of natural gas. And they're involved in the petrochemical industry, as well as developing basically anything that you see plastic around here. About 25% of it came through Saudi Aramco one way or another. So really, really big. In 2012, they were the subject of an attack On August 15th, starting at 11:08 a.m. Kingdom of Saudi Arabia time. And the attackers went ahead and posted it 2 hours earlier on Pastebin. You can actually still find this on Pastebin if you search the keyword of cutting sword of justice. So the organization, they purported to be a hacktivist group. This was around the time of Arab Spring. And they said, hey man, these countries in the Middle East, they're not very nice. They're corrupt. They got blood on their hands. They're just naughty and nasty. And we especially don't like the Al Saud regime. So we're going to go after the piggy bank, so to speak, of the Saudi Arabian government, which happens to be Saudi Aramco. And they said that they went ahead and penetrated Aramco company systems in several countries, sent a malicious virus to destroy 30,000 computers in Saudi Aramco. The destruction began at 11:08 a.m. and it will be completed within a few hours. And then they gave a warning about other corrupt regimes that the same thing could occur to them. Now many people ask, why Saudi Aramco? How many of you have even heard of Saudi Aramco before today? Only a couple of people. So it's the biggest company you've never heard of. They don't make commercials. They don't have gasoline stations that say Aramco. They don't have anything like Gazprom. You see gas stations for Gazprom, but you won't see one for Aramco. So they didn't think, well, we're not an attractive target because nobody knows about us, really. They decided to use a two-pronged attack during the lowest staff period, which happens to be Ramadan, month-long. Be the same thing as hitting Bulgaria during the Christmas area, the lowest staff numbers, right? Because they're not going to hit you at 9:30 a.m. on a Monday morning. They're going to hit you when it's going to hurt the most and you're going to have the slowest reaction time. They took out 85% of the Windows-based operating systems in the company. We're talking about the world's most valuable company. And it was called Shamoon. Symantec called it disk track for some odd reason, I'm not sure why. And this is actually a visual of what it looked like. Kaspersky did a really nice write-up with the visual. So they were able to get in using spear phishing for a couple of domain administrators on the Saudi Aramco network. Once they're able to get in, they set up a command and control server. This is actually the IP address that was used for the attack. And they went ahead, stole a driver certificate, dropped the component in, and then when the timer went off, the wiping and destruction began. And it's related to Stuxnet and to Flame and Dooku because there are elements that are kind of similar. So there was two vulnerabilities used from Stuxnet that were actually used here in a different manner with Shamoon, and also it had a burning American flag when we isolated it in our lab. So the attack timeline occurred like this. Think that the spear phishing occurred in April, May of the year. Kaspersky saw that the IP addresses were being used by attackers. First indicators were escalated to Saudi Aramco from the international offices. The wiping began. Saudi Aramco didn't know what was going on, so they madly disconnected themselves from the internet and from each other. So they decided we're going to keep the control network safe, and they completely isolated it, or tried to. And they had no website. They had no email. They had no desk phones because it was all VoIP. They had no holiday system. They had, many times, the backups were affected because they were running on Windows server systems, which were hit. So basically anything Windows-based or connected to or relied on Windows-based systems were deeply affected and were knocked out. This is my favorite. I call this my Godzilla facepalm because they put a lot of money and effort into the control network, but they put almost no effort into the IT security systems. To reset your password before the attack, it was over HTTP. Anyone think that's secure? Not really, right? Domain admins were resetting their password over HTTP. This is my favorite quote. The gentleman who used to be the CEO is now the current oil minister for Saudi Arabia. And he basically said, you rely on technology, and then one day it's gone. And many times you think you can do without technology, but then you realize your whole business is built upon it, or your life is built upon it. And it literally was gone. at that point. You couldn't even contact employees. They had to purchase cell phones for all of the employees because how else were you going to keep track of them? They had no way to connect in. They even went back to typewriters because they had no network printers or copiers or anything like that. And it flashes when I press it in, but no, it's doing it okay.
No, it's running out of batteries.
Okay.
The other microphone is also recording.
Oh, okay, all right. So this picture was taken 13 days after the attack occurred. And what it's showing is basically the country of Saudi Arabia was running out of gasoline, diesel, or petrol, if you happen to call it that, because their entire truck loading system was automated, and that was connected to Windows-based systems, and it was wiped out. They had no payment systems either. So the trucks had no choice but to line up, and there were miles and miles of these. And when I say the country was running out of gas, you're talking about 13 days after an attack, people couldn't go to the pump and fill up. And that also meant that police were being affected, emergency services. What about if you call up for an ambulance and they tell you they have no gas to get there? Military was affected. Now, countries don't store an unlimited supply of gasoline or oil. You only have so much that you can actually store. Now, the shame of it is, the malware was actually used in one other area, and it was used in the country of Qatar. One day after that photograph was taken, Qatar's national oil company was compromised and went completely down. Now, about 25% of the world's energy flows one way or another through Saudi Aramco. And about 19% of the world's energy goes through Qatar. So it got to the point in 2012, in September, that 39% of the world's energy was about to be cut off. So obviously they had to do a lot of things to restore as quickly as possible. Now, because Saudi Aramco does have a whole lot of money, they were able to basically buy the world's supply of hard drives. So if you try to buy a hard drive or anything that requires memory, from September 2012 till January 2013, the price was much higher. You were actually paying a little tax for Saudi Aramco being attacked, because they called up and said, hey, we're going to buy your entire supply. We've got the world's largest fleet of aircraft. We're flying it down. We'll handle all the customs. We're buying everything. Have a great day. That's the only way that they could actually recover.
So that's why the hard drives with them.
Yeah. Yeah. So any questions on the Saudi Aramco attack?
You said the ICS systems were protected.
Well, Saudi Arabia said that not a drop of oil was lost. However, I was informed outside of my employment of Saudi Aramco that 2 production facilities were brought down. Any other questions?
How much time did they need to recover from that and start
Oh.
function normally?
So basically, it occurred in the middle of August, and around November, December, they were able to get fully up. They tried to get back up a couple of times, and they were brought back down by the same group. You can actually see the fight that they were broadcasting on Pastebin that says, oh, you think you're back up. Here's the new IP range that you set up, and here's the new username and password for your CEO. And they ended it with the word hugs. So they announced several times, 3 times that they were up. 2 of those times, when the journalists tried to follow up, all the emails bounced and the websites were back down because they were DDoSing the infrastructure. Yeah. And it costs a lot of money to fix. More money than I will ever see in my entire life. Yes. Any other questions on the Aramco? This one was in Germany. So this is concerning Havex, or Havex, however you want to pronounce it. And it was infecting dozens of different types of manufacturing and production facilities in Germany. First it started with the pharmaceutical industry, and then it branched out. And And they would not detail which companies were affected, but they just said dozens in their report. And it lasted basically most of the year. Nobody took responsibility for it at all, which is very interesting. And my favorite is, this is the world's first known case of cyber being used to kill people. What had happened was they were able to social engineer and get into the IT network, and also social engineered and got into the control network. And they used open source network intelligence gathering techniques, such as looking at your social media profiles, who you're connected to, and what have you, to build a very realistic email that you would open and allow the payload to come in. They showed a very high level of sophistication in both IT and ICS. And they started breaking small things at the steel mill. And the engineers thought, oh, it's just an engineering problem, just replace it or whatever. And more stuff kept breaking to the point where, you know how you have a fire alarm that's supposed to automatically go off if there's smoke? Well, in a controls network, they've got things like that called safety systems, which, if there's a problem, should be able to safely shut down the plant before anyone's harmed. Unfortunately, the attackers modified the safety systems so that they could no longer do a safe shutdown. There was overpressurization, and the plant blew up, killing 3 people, and dozens were injured. Bad injuries. No group has taken responsibility for it at all, which is very, very curious. Typically, if you blow up a steel mill, and say you're a terrorist organization that uses cyber attacks, you might want to take responsibility, right? Woo, I blew this. Nobody did.
Maybe it's a nation attack and they just, it's like a fire drill for...
Or maybe it was a nation state and they were testing and did an oopsie. And
Yeah.
you never know. Maybe one day we'll find out. Maybe one day we won't. And this is what social engineering kind of looks like. Now this is a picture I took from DEF CON a couple of years ago. They've got a social engineering capture the flag where you can win money. I think the capture the flag is now worth about $5,000 US if you win. And you're just looking at all of the different points and criteria at your target. And this goes on and on. There's several slides. But things such as, do they outsource their IT? Who collects their garbage? How do they dispose of the garbage? What kind of shipping company do they use? Can I put like a FedEx polo shirt on and get into their facility? Can I pretend to be the waste management company or something like that? Who's the caterers? Are they employees or is it an outside company? So could I pretend to be that catering company? What websites do they block? How can I use that against them? How about their badges? Do they only use RFID badges? And can I clone that? So these are the different types of things that social engineers will look at, as well as some recon information such as operating systems usage and so forth. So this is by far my favorite video. Does anybody want to see a 8-ton diesel generator blown up remotely? Yes! I thought so. So this is Project Aurora. Basically, many very important facilities use these types of generators. Hospitals, to make sure obviously their ICU patients don't die if there's a power outage, or in the surgery room, nuclear power plants, water utilities companies, etc. Places that need to keep the power on. Military facilities even use these. We used to use them when I was in the military. And what they want wanted to prove was if you could, with your finger and your keyboard and a remote connection, send the appropriate commands to actually break it. And that's what they proved. There was a general who watched the demonstration who was interviewed by a journalist afterwards. And the journalist asked, well, what did you think about the demonstration? The general said, I wish I brought another pair of pants to work that day. Because nobody had seen that you could remotely break things like that. So it was very interesting. Even though it was from 2007. That's one of the reasons why if you have things connected to the internet, an acquaintance of mine or a friend of mine posted it on Twitter, basically says, nice people don't put vulnerable systems on the internet. That's what it boils down to. Here's an interesting one. Does anybody know what causes massive power outage in the United States?
Squirrels.
Damn it! You're the only person who has ever guessed that right ahead. I tried to have a evil-looking squirrel. The reality of the situation is, although we're talking about cyber and digital attacks and so forth, actually the #1 threat against the U.S. power grid are squirrels. The #1 threat against the Estonian power grid is backhoes and farm equipment, because after the snows, they don't see the substations and run right into them and break them. So the Estonian power company has all these pictures of farm equipment that ended up attacking and knocking out, by mistake, electrical grid. Now, a lot of organizations will say, hey man, we got like a firewall, and it's fine, right? So we're technologists, and here's what usually happens with a firewall, or anything else that stops us from doing what we need to do to get our job done. We'll find an engineering workaround. Yes. Another one I hear, antivirus. Oh, we got that, man. Or anything else. So these are current stats. This happens to be one of the banking trojans called Zeus. And antivirus only sees 40% of it. So it actually misses more than it actually can see. You can find this on abuse.ch, where they track this information. So if you're relying on some singular thing as an end-all be-all, it's not going to work, because there's ways around. You almost look like you had a question. Nope? Okay. Now, when people ask, is ICS in and of itself more vulnerable? Well, there are various reasons why. Old stuff, people don't know how to use it properly. There's a lot of increased security risk. Obviously, they're connecting everything to the internet, so you're going to introduce another way to attack it. IT is being used in ICS. You gotta try to make more and more and more and more money, so you might outsource something. And then an executive might want to know exactly what's happening on the production floor, so they want to connect it to their iPad wherever they are in the world. Right? That sounds like a great idea. So, great example of how security research has actually picked up in this area. How many of you have been to the Chaos Computer Club Congress in the last 2 years? The Chaos Computer Club actually has one of these. If I can find it. There it is. So this is actually from DEF CON, and it's called the SCADA Village, but CCC now has one as well. And what you do is you get to learn how to use, program, and whatever on Modbus and other control protocols. And you start out with, this is a PLC and it's a robotic arm. And you can go and hang out there. It's just similar to like the lockpick village, right? You just go and hang out. When you want to move up, you can go ahead and attack a mock-up of a water utilities company. So you'll have the filtration controls and disinfectant controls and so forth. So a lot more people are learning about this. Now this is in both the US and in Germany. This year, there are rumors that the SCADA Village will actually be a nuclear power plant, to play with a nuclear power plant. So that's a bit concerning. And the reason why is I had said that I was going to show some examples. Now, port 102 happens to be Siemens systems. I pulled up all of the Siemens systems that I can find that are directly connected to the internet in Bulgaria. I've found very easily 12 of them, and I can even map them out if I want. We talk about Modbus, which was from the first video example. I find 42 examples all mapped out in the country of Bulgaria, which are directly connected to the internet. And remember, Modbus will take any command without authentication from any system.
Free phone calls.
Yeah, right? Who wants free phone calls? So it's very problematic. And this happens to be the login for an industrial control system here in Bulgaria. It's a remote connection that vendors use with a serial gateway over port 81, clear text. You can go ahead and check the settings, the status on the system, and everything right here in Bulgaria. So it's a bit problematic at times. But if you know about it, you can do something about it. And I highly suggest people go ahead and look around Shodan and see what they can find, especially if you work for a company and you're like, hey, did you know that a bunch of this stuff was just showing on the internet? Because you might not want it to. And then you can do something about it in a low cost, no cost way. Oh, another one is one of the reasons why you really don't want your systems connected to the internet that aren't secured. Here's an example from Korea. Would anybody like to print to the University of Korea on their HP desktop?
Only they bring it to me. I don't get it. Go there.
So this is a direct connection over to South Korea, and they've left their printer network at their Advanced Technical University connected to the internet.
Advanced printer.
Huh?
Advanced printer.
Advanced printer, there's no username and passwords. You can get all of the network information behind, including the default gateways and everything else.
HTTPS optional. Yeah.
So it's not a good idea. This is not a good idea.
Maybe it's a honeypot.
No, they've got 16 of these with 16 different networks.
16 honeypots.
So there's a lot of vulnerabilities, and I'm not going to read off this list, but you can imagine it's problematic. There's a lot of risks. But it's one of these things, if you know about it, you can do something about it. I like the Art of War, it basically says, know yourself before your enemy does, so that you can protect yourself and maybe leverage that weakness against your enemy. Maybe even set up a fake vulnerability. But these things happen. Now, for target attractiveness, many companies will say, hey man, nobody knows about us, we don't advertise, whatever. Many times it's not you that's the target, it's actually who you're connected to that could be the target. There's an example in the United States where a shop called Target, of all things, Target, nationwide all over the US. The attackers couldn't directly get into the Target network, so what they did was they found that a heating and air conditioning company had a direct connection into their payment system, and this little mom and pop company had little to no security. And so they were able to get into the HVAC company, directly into the payment systems, go ahead and modify things, put them malware on the POS systems, the payment point systems, and that type of stuff. And it ended up stealing at least 25 million, at least. I think it was actually 225 million. That was unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. I hear also, well, nobody knows about this stuff called Modbus. How could they attack it, right? We've just seen it's pretty easy to find out about protocols like that. It's not a big deal. So if we look back at the famous Lockheed Martin kill chain, one of these things is I've already shown you how to use Shodan to think like an attacker. And it doesn't take that long to learn, does it? Pretty darn easy. Right? And sometimes, if you need to defend something, well, you need to kind of think like a naughty attacker, so that you're not taken advantage of. You even need to do this at your home systems. How could an attacker get into my stuff? All right, maybe I'll lock this down, maybe I'll put a password or a two-factor or whatever you might want to put on. Change the default configurations, especially default passwords. Don't keep admin or something on your home router.
There was a joke that someone said on Twitter, I'm not afraid of the rise of the machines in Terminator. As we know how bad we write things, everything will be with 10 years old vulnerabilities. We vote password. So
Exactly.
Skynet won't be a problem.
However, they've already launched something called Skynet. The UK government launched it. It's a satellite system for military use. It's been up in the air now, I think, about 3 years. And they decided to call it Skynet.
Why would you call it Skynet?
And the
It's
artificial...
begun.
I'm sure you know about the drone activity, drones that kill people from the U.S. government. Well, the artificial intelligence behind the scoring mechanism to find a terrorist, it's actually called Skynet. So, when we're looking at what an incident response is, because we'll take a break and cut the video for the tabletop. The main thing is getting into that preparation phase, just like anything else that could go wrong. You have auto insurance if you have a car. You might have a smoke detector or fire extinguisher or something like that because you're preparing just in case something bad happens. And it's the same type of thing. You obviously need to be able to find it, keep it from spreading if you can, get it out, eradicate, then get back to normal, and then try to learn from your mistakes so that it doesn't happen again. And those are the main steps. And it goes around and around and around. And it might be very formalized, such as a bunch of policies or whatever, or something very informal. But it's a good idea to know certain things in preparation. So you might have a list of contacts of people who can help you out if your systems get hosed or compromised. Like you probably have a contact list of other people within the hacker space to help you out if you have a particular problem. The same type of thing.
On paper.
On paper. Oh yeah, all of the response plans from the Saudi Aramco attack are all saved on SharePoint, so when the systems were knocked out, they had nothing printed out. Yeah, so it's a good idea to print out, certain key documents for things like that. It's a good idea, right? Now the detection portion, it can be kind of hard to detect if there's a bit of malware, even in a regular IT network, even on your own home PC, but it's really difficult in a control network. They believe averages about 2.5 years time to detect a piece of malware on a control network. So it can be really problematic. But you just go around and around and around, once you find something, to try to get rid of it, retest, kill the vulnerability, see if you can fix it, put something else up if you can't fix it, and then learn from it. To try to prepare, there's a lot of paperwork or just stuff in your daily life that you might want to get ready. A great example is at home. You might have a firebox with your important documents in case your house catches on fire. It's the same type of thing. For detection, one of these things, it's very hard to say how exactly you can detect certain types of attacks. Don't know if I can view on the screen, but one of the ways you can actually detect attacks, say on control networks to make it easier, with ICS malware, it will affect the RAM, or volatile memory that's running, and also the CPU. So if, for example, the CPU is used to run at 10% at all times, and it raises by 20% or greater, and it's constantly running at that point, that's an indicator of compromise on a control network. The same with the CPU and the RAM. But there's no hard or fast rules to do this kind of stuff. There's no hard or fast rules to detect malware even on your home PC nowadays, because they've made it much more sophisticated. But if you happen to see something that involves stuff, go ahead and try to do something about it. Now, I don't know the laws in Bulgaria, but I know some of the laws in other countries where if it's involving, say, telecommunications or nuclear or energy production or water or something like that, you have to report to the national authorities immediately, like the Bulgarian CERT, for example. So if you want to try to contain and eradicate things, well, hopefully you have network segmentation in some way, shape, or form. I mean, even home systems are using that nowadays with switches and things like that. And that's really the only type of way you can contain something. Think of it as a biological. To recover, you're going to try to retest to see if the same hole's there so another attacker can take advantage of it, which makes sense. And to see if there's anything that still might be dodgy on there, and and get it back to regular order. And for the lessons learned, you might write a report, you might tell people, you might blog about it, you might do whatever. You might talk about it. You might have to report up to say, hey, this is what happened. But if you have to do that and talk to management, you can't use any technical terms. You have to try your best not to use any technical terms or something they won't understand. Try not to talk to the media unless you want to, but that can be kind of scary. And then to close things out. Now, for lessons learned, this is one of the most difficult ones or stages, because lessons learned means that somebody might have to say that they did something wrong and that led to an attack. So many times it isn't done.
Anyway, it's time now for a new segment called...
Now, why lessons learned to me is very, very important is for this reason. People don't learn from what happened in the past. Well, it's going to happen again. I hope no one's offended by cursing Australians. This is just a very short video of why I think it's very important.
Anyway, it's time now for a new segment called...
Yes, what have we learnt from history? Because Craig, the PM, spoke at the summit yesterday about the importance of history, and we agree with him. Often it pays to cast your mind back to see what impact history has had on our society.
Yeah, that's right, and find out if we've learnt the lessons from the past. For instance, I always love the story of the Trojan horse, you know, when the Greeks won the war against Troy.
Yeah, Troy in Turkey.
Yeah, in Turkey, exactly. Then the Greeks smuggled soldiers through the city gates inside a giant wooden horse. They came out and won the war.
It's a defining moment in warfare history.
Exactly, but would anyone be so stupid as to fall for it again? Would anybody let a Trojan horse through their gates today?
So important to have some sort of lessons learned. If, say, corporate won't do one for your group.
And to bear in mind, Troy was in what is now Turkey, so
Yeah.
they did learn the lessons.
They're the only ones remembering, right? If you are involved in an incident, it's a good idea. This is just a general overview of some of the things that you might want to have ready, just in case things start going down. For example, if you lose your email, you might want to have a secured external lockdown one you can still communicate with. You might want to have spares. You have a lot of spare switches here, for example. You can always use a switch, right? You might want to have radios if you need it, a place to talk about it, like an incident room, we call it a war room, so that people who are unaware of the situation don't misconstrue the conversation and panic, which can happen. I've seen that before. Up-to-date system drawings. How many people even have an up-to-date system drawing of their home network?
My network is small. In the office network, of course.
Of course. But it can be difficult to keep track of it if the network keeps growing and growing and someone doesn't document it, and suddenly you've got 1,500 employees.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when an incident occurs, almost nothing's kept up to date. Or it's saved on the systems. That's not kind of.
Or we can start from scratch.
Or you can start from scratch. Many times that's cheapest. But these are just general things they might want to have available. And if you have a grab one or like a little backpack with the equipment, zip tied to zippers, or people will go, hey, I need that USB thumb drive, I'm just going to reach in and grab that. And that'll happen, so just be careful of that.
One of the many things I saw in research plans, people just don't have enough tools. Really, I mean, not enough screwdrivers, not the proper screwdrivers or pliers or whatever. They just go in the data center like empty-handed. Oh, let's say, oh, I need a screwdriver. I'll get from the guy there. This guy cannot provide you with everything.
But I thought IT provided everyone with everything, right? That's what IT is for. Everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have anything to eat at home. Call the IT. You don't know what to do.
Excellent. Now this actually ends the presentation part, and what we'll do is probably a good idea to take a quick, say 10-minute break, and then we'll come back for the exercise portion of that. Yeah? Okay.
Maybe it was something just something in the past. I think when I tried to use Shodan in the past on Chrome, it didn't work so well. But
well, one of the problems is they now kind of locked it down a little bit so that they really want you to have a membership. So So they now won't let you use filters. So if you want to say, I want to see everything that might be Siemens in Bulgaria, and you'll use a thing that says country :BG for Bulgaria, it won't show it. But what you can do, this is maybe if you want to do freelance or something like that, but you can get a regular account where you purchase credits for reports, and it will get you access to that. So I pay, I think, yeah, about $50 US a year, and it gets me access to 50,000 reports.
So that's
And I
worth
can
keeping
filter.
in mind that's what you're working at.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen some lists of searches for Google
Yeah,
that you can
Google
use for
Dorking.
finding what do you call that, secret documents,
Yeah, yeah.
confidential documents.
Yeah. So if
It's
you-
so easy to find like credentials for databases and stuff like that, because sometimes open CMSs are not well configured, and I've found so many Moodle hacked websites with access to the database, WordPress websites too. Yeah, Joomla, Drupal, whatever. You can just check up a couple of error messages, and you know that this website
you know what it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Quick question. So now is the workshop public? I can also stream this.
Doesn't matter, it's fine as well. And it's easier, we'll try to use this board for the team exercise, because what you guys are going to be doing is actually building a network for the exercise, and I'm going to show you how.
Do we need to be aware of network?
Do you need hardware?
No, we're just going to put it on the board.
Okay.
Going to put it on the board. So one of the things to get some of the searches, if you go into where the Explorer is, you just can't see it on your screen.
Возможно, посмотрим в такой случай.
Yeah, that's good.
It does show down. Go to Explorer.
Yeah.
And then
Searching for MySQL is like error. Please log in.
now
Please
these
search for this.
ones, it'll let you go without the filters, and then you can actually find the stuff. So, for example, on the ICS part, if you want to find, I don't know, a Siemens system or